You know, it always amazes me how many people in the West would happily compromise the foundations of our entire civilization to appease religious fascism. I find it disturbing that they would care so little about their children's future, even if they're too complacent or naive or politically blinkered to care about their own. And one of the most depressing questions I get asked by people like this is, why do you hate Muslims? It's depressing because anyone who's seen my videos knows very well that I've never expressed hatred for anyone. Hate is for losers, we all know that, because it's self-destructive. We do all know that, don't we? Now, it's often claimed that many people in the West are converting to Islam, and it's true that some are, but it's also true that many Muslims in the West are leaving Islam, but you don't hear so much about them for obvious reasons. Some of them have been brave enough to make themselves known and reach out to help other Muslims who want to escape the tyranny of their religion, and like them, it's the religion that I have a problem with, not the people. So no, I don't hate Muslims, thanks for asking, I wish them well. Even the fanatics who stand at the roadside with their dopey little banners and bulging eyeballs calling for death to the West. I even wish those boneheads well, in that I wish them good mental health, if that isn't too wildly optimistic. And of course I know that there are lots of moderate, peaceful Muslims. Indeed, many of them are so moderate and peaceful, they're invisible and silent, and that is part of the problem. And just because there are lots of peaceful Muslims, it doesn't mean the religion itself is not an aggressive fascist ideology that threatens all our freedom, nor does it mean that Western governments aren't falling over themselves to make excuses for it, pretending that Islam has nothing to do with the violence inspired and sanctioned by its scripture and repeatedly carried out in its name. Just look at the craven behaviour that allowed the massacre at Fort Hood to take place. We know it could have been prevented. But thanks to political correctness in the American army, all the warning signs were ignored in case somebody got offended. All reference to Islam has been airbrushed out of the official Pentagon report, even though the guy handed out copies of the Quran beforehand and shouted Allahu Akbar as he carried out the murders. I'm surprised the officers who shot him haven't been accused of Islamophobia. Maybe they will be at the trial when we find out what a victim he is and how living in a decadent country like America, his religion is the only thing keeping him sane. All over the Western world, we've given Islamic supremacists the impression that they have every right to be outraged, insulted and offended by everything we do and say. And some of us have come to believe it ourselves, and that is the real core of this problem. Mark Twain said that faith is believing what you know ain't so. Well, political correctness is doing what you know ain't right. In every Western country, Islamic extremists are allowed to exploit religious privilege for political ends by claiming to represent all Muslims, and the media always treats them as if they do. These groups give themselves official-sounding titles and talk a smooth line in community harmony while doing all they can to prevent integration, to keep Muslims apart and ghettoized in a separate society with a separate identity, separate rules and standards. In other words, they exist to cause division in society, to drive a wedge between communities that doesn't need to be there any more than they need to exist as organizations. Take, for example, the Council on American Islamic Relations. That's quite a puffed-up, important-sounding title that implies a meeting of equal ideologies, equal points of view that need to find common ground. When in fact all that's needed is for Muslim immigrants to adapt to the American way of life, or the British or Australian or Canadian way of life, or not to go there. To respect the laws and customs like everyone else, not to try and change them to Islamic ones, and not to define themselves as a separate group deserving special status. That's where it begins and ends. There is no debate, there is no common ground to find, there is no American Islamic relations, and there is no need for any self-appointed council of Sharia advocating Hamas-linked religious fascists to oversee it. Sharia in the West is like urine in a waterhole. Any amount is too much. Sharia dehumanizes women. It threatens the freedom and the dignity of every woman in the Western world. It discriminates in such a fundamental way, there's no way around it. There's no compromise. Misogyny runs through it like a dye. And that should be more than enough reason for us to banish it as aggressively and as thoroughly as we banish rabies. If you live in the United States, and especially if you've ever accused anyone of Islamophobia. I urge you to read this book, Muslim Mafia. If you read only one book in this year, or one book in your whole life, make it this one for your sake and for the sake of your children, especially the female ones. This book is the result of an undercover investigation that reveals the bare-knuckle truth about Cair, the Muslim Brotherhood, and the extensive network of Islamic fanatics who've eaten their way into American society like termites and who seek to undermine it and destroy it from within. It provides substantial documentary proof that Islamists have penetrated the highest levels of American politics and law enforcement in their quest to impose Sharia on the United States and get rid of the Constitution, aided and abetted by the most cowardly and shameful political correctness in government, in the media, and especially within the FBI, who seem to think it's more important to be culturally sensitive than to defend national security. This is an important book, which is why the American media has so assiduously ignored it. In publishing it, the authors have done more for their country and the civilized world than all the politicians on Capitol Hill combined will achieve in their entire careers. Political Islam is a threat to all civilized people. Muslims, Christians, Hindus, Sikhs, atheists, Buddhists, and especially Jews. If America falls, we all do. So wherever you live in the world, if you care about freedom, read this book, and read it soon. Peace.